Welcome, kindred. Nice to see faces, both unfamiliar and familiar. Today has been quite the eventful day. I've spent my day in a melange of miasma and gore, tending to those who need it, and catering to those who don't. Some appropriate music for the day's events, I imagine. Certainly can't hurt. Let's see. Add the music in over my voice here. Hopefully that sounds good. I certainly don't want the music to overpower. Let's see if we can limit some of that. Now, to talk a little more on the necessitations of this evening. Depending on how our electricity holds up and how interested our evening crew is tonight, we may just go over an extended synopsis of what we've done so far upon the night road. Assuming things go well, we may continue further, taking on the role of no one, an 11th generation gangrel neonate, making their way on the harsh roads of the American Southwest. Prince Leto has had quite the heyday sending us around various parts of Arizona and Texas, and I'm excited to bring our new viewers up to date on just how well that's gone. My hounds and our lovely keeper of Elysium are sleeping peacefully after a day as mired in the miasma and gore as we've had ourselves. As we start to filter in and make ourselves comfortable for the evening, I hope you can join me in finding something delicious to drink. It's important to keep your appetites whetted as we follow our path down the Choice of Games' Night Road. Without further ado, we'll begin with the recap of Session 1. We'll follow that with Session 2's recap and end with a recap of Session 3, so we know just where we stand with the Camarilla, the Anarch, and everyone else we've encountered thus far. We are no one, a non-binary 11th generation gangrel, sired by Lumpago, who's gone missing. After the departure of our sire, who kept a dungeon of whelps upon whom to feed and be served, we were proffered a mentor by the Camarilla, within whose masquerade we readily thrived. Julian, a young Banu Hakim assassin, became our mentor, and we learned much, both good and bad, from the belying youth of our new vampire comrade. It was in those early nights under the desert moon that we diablerized Isla, an older vampire, and drank deep of the vitae coursing through her veins. A deadly sin in the eyes of the Camarilla, but one we nevertheless found ourselves easily drawn into the ecstasy of. We'd left Julian just as easily, disapproving of the Camarilla methods of blood extraction pits on migrants at the border. We stole his lime green geo-tracker and absconded with $300 of his money as absolutely soon as we were able to. He found us after only a year, sunken, sallow, and nearly bloodless. He tossed us more coinage and a stack of USBs, demanding we repay our crimes against him by interring ourselves into his employ as a courier. How could we refuse? In the course of his service, we stumbled upon a convenience store within which we made our shelter, hiding from the blazing heat of the American Southwest. The next night, as we woke, we smelled fresh blood and knew immediately there were mortals nearby. Finally, we could feed. This squad of mortals were seeking their own sustenance and shelter, and before we could grab one of them to feast upon, something else startled them. An old Nosferatu, a sewer rat, with all the markings of death and undeath, destroyed one of the living creatures with little more than a swipe of his fist. Even in unlife there is monstrosity, and this mindless wight of a former Nosferatu tended to destroy everything in its path. It was only able to kill one of the mortal creatures before we drove it off with the assistance of another and our loyal Lobo Magda. We curtailed the possible Masquerade breach of the Nosferatu sighting, as well as our own horrors, by murdering the three creatures, feasting on their blood and filling our veins with the sating sustenance of the mortal coil. When we'd drunk our fill, we hacked up their bodies so it would appear an act of senseless violence, all too common and expected in the Arizona deserts. Lobo quite enjoyed the bones we tossed her as well. Anything to keep the authorities off our trails. Shortly thereafter, we found ourselves in Tucson and made our way to Elysium at the Viper, a prominent club. We knew we couldn't meet the prince of this city as we were, and approached one of his many servants for a shower and a fresh change of clothing. Keeping our courier package close at hand, we showered and dressed ourselves in the fresh coveralls given to us before speaking with the prince. Prince Leto knew us before we even arrived, and his pet sewer rat viewed us with as much disdain as Leto's eagle, whom we'd chased off just the night prior outside the convenience store in which we found shelter. Pardon me. The prince was open, more open than most, and immediately offered to share the details of the USBs we had delivered him. What game was he playing? We were met then with the video and images of an unknown Tremere warlock, and an all too familiar Nosferatu, the White. Dove's perturbance was palpable but cut short, and we were truthful with the prince, both about our lack of information on the Tremere and our encounter and subsequent escape of the White, who we then learned to be Dove's former sire. The prince left the White's future to his pet sewer rat, Dove. We were introduced to various members of the prince's court, including those from whom we could acquire weapons, clothes, shelter, and perhaps most importantly, blood. We spent some time schmoozing, lying, and ingratiating ourselves to the prince's court before setting off in search of food at the Red Rock, a nearby club we'd been given permission to feed at. Finding a young woman there trying entirely too hard to exhibit crazy mess, we let her talk her way into our pants and spent a portion of the evening providing her with la petite mort of our feeding, sealing the wound with a swipe of our tongue, lest she spread the tale of her interview with the vampire. We made our way back into the cool desert air, where a car approached us, tossing us information of a nearby pawn shop where we could acquire our own vehicle before speeding off into the night. At the pawn shop, we met Elena, a pretty, tattooed woman with whom we made quick rapport. Her H.R. Geiger tattoos were as intriguing as her face, and we flirted our way into an exchange of discounts for future financial work in her shop. After much perusal, we purchased a Honda S2000, a quick convertible that lacked reliability and durability. It would get us to where we're going, but not much further. We made our way then to a sanctuary, a parking garage, and an office provided us by the prince of the city for a night we might rest. That's when Julian returned. Again. He informed us that we were being watched, and maybe politics in the city weren't nearly what they seemed. He told us of the webcam buried in our ceiling, and he gave it to us, a gift upon which to do research while he sought out any other bugs that might be buried deep within our walls. We discovered that some of the supplies for the webcam were tied to the Second Inquisition. A newly arisen ancient enemy of Cainites. Of course, we know we can't trust Julian even as far as we could throw him. We ended our evening by sending Julian on his way, bedding down in our sanctuary with more on our minds and our plate than had been there any time in recent memory. The next night, we must needs to return to the prince for details on our new job, and with more decisions left yet to make. Session 2 saw us setting out on the first of Prince Leteau's 3 courier jobs. To see Paternoster, a Bruja, at St. Basil's Hospital in Phoenix. We were given a key card and name tag, as well as a USB to deliver. Pertinent information, to be sure. When we arrived at the hospital, if you could call this miasmic dungeon of a building that, it was immediately apparent that this was anything but a place of healing. We made our way to the first service door we could find and swiped our keycard just beyond the reception desk. To our chagrin and dismay, the entry light ran red as the old vitae coursing through our sluggish veins. With a soft glance around, and finding the guard candy-crushing aimlessly on his mobile phone, we swipe it a second time. Red. Again. Now a receptionist had her stink eye on us, and we knew our janitorial disguise was unlikely to get us very far in the face of this rabid Karen. However, Magda was waiting just outside the hospital, and our lovely Lobo was eager to showcase her nimble nose. Utilizing our bond of animalism, the Famulus, we searched the exterior of the hospital for an alternative entrance. The door we discovered seemed open, but had above it an old CCTV camera that would surely record our entry. Or, at least, it would have, if it had been anything but a decoy cam with a false wire. We waltzed right in, and the minimalist security made it clear they didn't have much communication with hospital administration. A small break, at least. Our main concern was business. After all, we were there to do a job first and foremost. We immediately took in our surroundings, looking for anything that might alarm the prince as a breach of the masquerade. It didn't take long. This den of iniquity drew our ire when we found a freshly drained corpse littering a gurney in the hallway, bite marks about its neck and wrists. These Cainites were either so stupidly brazen as to neglect sealing the wound, or worse, too thin-blooded to have acquired that particular power. Either way, we doubt that Prince Leto would have approved. That's when we heard the voice. Oh my God, his neck. There's so much blood. We wandered into the nearby room to find a young-looking woman sitting down, and an older man who looked to have more than one foot in death's door already. Aged before his time, this was the Bruja, Patermaster. We recognized him from Leto's photos. Unable to convince the squeamish Rita May to assist with this body in the room, Patermaster encouraged us to hold him down, which we obliged, pushing down our hunger and gripping the still living but on the edge of death corpse by the shoulders. It became readily apparent that the man wasn't going to make it. Patermaster and his sycophant, refusing to let a fresh meal go to waste, immediately set upon the freshly deceased, devouring and draining it before the Bruja turned his full attention toward us, dismissing his minion in favor of the message from Leto. This one knew us already as well. We were quickly escorted to his office, and the aged rebel displayed a supernatural ability to summon and dismiss two edgy katanas from seemingly nowhere. Duncan, and Connor as the Highlander fan calls them, are part judge, jury, and full-time executioner here. But there were bigger fish to fry, and larger things to stake. Patermaster quickly explains the new director's plans, as well as the threat that poses to Prince Leto, the Camarilla, and the kindred, if you could call them that, of St. Basil's. A proposal, you see, has been put before the Phoenix City Council to renovate and modernize the dismal hospital, records, windows, staff, windows, everything the kindred can't afford to experience. We could have gone home. Our job was finished, after all, but in this we saw an opportunity. After admonishing the Bruja, he gave us the lowdown. The director's office is guarded, but not well enough, and the two of us hatched a plan to plant some incriminating evidence on her computer. Patermaster was to disable the guard's monitoring station, and we decided on cosplaying a medical physician to break in under the guise of record-seeking in a 5-minute window. Now, by this point we've spent the last couple nights sleeping in the morgue, a special box, chilled just for us. We watched the guards' habits, learned their schedules, and acquainted ourselves with their weaknesses while we met Patermaster's would-be coterie. Malkavians, Thin Bloods, rat-infested Nosferatu, Catif, and a ghostly woman we could make neither heads nor tails of. Before we'd formulated a plan to ruin the director, one of Patermaster's coterie was found dead, headless. We offered to perform an autopsy and discovered she was definitely beheaded by something sharp, and after a more careful examination, found a large indentation where she'd been staked just prior, as well as rat bites all along her torso. It doesn't take two to figure out the Nosferatu was to blame. Patermaster joined us as we went to Sartorius, the Nosferatu's haven beneath the morgue, but we were too late. He had departed and taken everything of value with him, leaving only an empty room when we arrived. Patermaster deemed he would deal with the Nosferatu in time, and we moved on towards our plan of dealing with the director. We dressed in our doctoral best and told the Bruja to cut the monitoring in 5 minutes. When he cut it, we approached the room, requesting access for records. Now, while we sought out the guards' info and schedules, we realized there seemed to be two different tiers of guards here at St. Basil's. The normal, don't-give-a-shit, run-of-the-mill type guards we're all used to seeing, and some far more militant guards who seemed to be keeping tabs on us and our whereabouts. We had to know more about them, and set out to snag one of them while they were unsuspecting. With Magda's animalistic assistance and our own preternatural quietude, it was no problem. And after subduing her, we were able to keep her phone unlocked long enough to download the data on it before the phone promptly wiped itself clean. Suspicious. We trawled the data we'd downloaded from the phone, seeking info on whether these guards were in alignment with the Second Inquisition. Turns out, this was a group of opioid runners who had been controlling the American Southwest the past few years under various names. Now, they worked from St. Basil's, and were rather successful at that. The guard outside Director Corelli's office seemed alert, and told us we had to wait for a moment while he got some confirmation of our whereabouts. The lie detector has determined that was a lie. The guard pulled his taser just as two more guards joined him. We bade Magda attack, but before we could accomplish much, an alarm was pulled in the building. When that alarm rang out, the hallways flooded with confused patients, whom quickly turned into panicked patients when one of the guards inexplicably fired into the ceiling. We made a dash for the exit, pulling mortal cattle in our way as the opioid runners fired into the crowd trying to stop us. We could hear the telltale sirens of police as we made our way out, and were forced against a pillar in sight of our car when a small firefight erupted between the guards and police. Of course, this distraction was to our advantage. We sent our trusty lupine Magna once more into the fray. She got the attention of both guards and police long enough for us to jump into a now-destroyed station wagon, which we drove, under fire, missing wheels, towards our own vehicle. We were able to hop out of it and into the Honda S2000, and Magda joined us before we sped away, driving as fast as we could towards Tucson. On the way back home, we heard a radio ad announcing the Phoenix City Council plans to renovate St. Basil's, and while we couldn't say we were happy with the outcome, we had avoided most of the backlash. For now. When we did arrive back in Tucson, one of Leto's servants paid us, and we slipped some of that money to another of his men, acquiring a blood doll for the night to sate the beast quickly rising inside us. As the night wound down, we made a decision on which of Leto's 3 jobs we'd take on next. Camp Scheffler. Welcome to those of you just joining us. We're going over a brief synopsis of the events thus far, depending on how well our technological issues hold up. We may move forward into the next chapter of the Night Road. Of course, if the snow continues to prove an issue for our meager internet connection, we may have to call it an evening when we've finished the recap. But rest assured that tomorrow night we will continue if that's the case. Session 3 picked up much where Session 2 left off, and we were to continue on our journey of work for Prince Leto, who gave us another job following our most esteemed mockery of the Camarige's desires for St. Basil's Psychiatric Hospital. While the prince wanted us to rein in the coterie running the show and prevent the new director from sending what rats made their nest in the dismal hospice care scurrying. We've all heard how that just went. Between Julian and Prince Leto's lackeys, we have quite a bit of bullshit to put up with now, don't we? Last evening, the prince made another request of us. This time we were to head to Texas, but he's got 2 deliveries for us rather than just the one. Oh well, 2 deliveries means 2 payments after all. The prince, an esteemed man of both culture and business, knows this all too well. Naturally, there's a catch. Isn't there always? One of our deliveries was going to find us on the road rather than allow us the opportunity to find them, and we were told rather cavalierly to look for a red Toyota. Joy. So we set our GPS and began the long drive to Camp Scheffler, deep in the Yellow Rose State, right along the border. The drive was long, but the pay was right, and how else could we be spending our evening anyway? Along one deserted stretch of back roads, the Corolla found us. After we finally stopped, lit by the hefty halogen lights of their high beams, we discovered the nature of the second part of our job. Or, at least, so we thought. The prince's servant, Carlos, a police officer, was gasping for air, bleeding out quickly in the front seat of his car. Through blood-spattered coughs, Carlos told us not to worry about him, tossed us a USB in the location of our next job, several hours to the north of the camp. Not so far that we wouldn't be able to make it and Camp Scheffler in the same night if we were quick, but it would be close. Too close for comfort for our blood. We used our experience in tracking and recon to locate the abandoned airstrip on a map and charted a backroads course that our Honda could handle with alacrity. The road was less bumpy than it might have been, and we arrived otherwise in good time. Too good. The road skidded beneath the Honda's tires when the surface changed before we saw it, and shortly after we arrived, hearing the drone of an airplane overhead, our car was lit in spotlights. Too bright. This could only mean one of a few things. Feds, the Second Inquisition, or both. But around the time we saw the high-powered rifles held in suited hands aimed our way, we heard as well as felt the growling of the lupine figures stalking past our vehicle. Gangrel. Outcasts. Anarchs at best guess. We clutched the USB ever tighter in our hand, watching the plane make its descent as carnage unfolded all around us. The outcasts were attacking the agents, and gunshots rang out like bells. High-powered bells at that. Most of them seemed distracted, dealing with the wolves viciously grabbing their weapons in strong jaws and opening their throats with long claws. All except one. As we contemplated how best to cross the battlefield unscathed, one car gunned their engines, heading straight for us. With only moments to decide, and Magda growling urgently beside us, we realized our best option would be to drive closer to the landing pad and lob the necessaries into their open door. Our aim be true. The car cut through the landscaping, cutting us off, but we were able to toss the info stick over and into the waiting hands of the shadowed figure silhouetted by the light inside, despite their best efforts. Now we had to escape. With the agents preoccupied, the plane with our information stick taking off, and our erstwhile assailant finding bigger fish to fry, we slammed on the gas, racing to put the airport and its violence in our rear view. With only a couple of hours to Camp Scheffler, and only a few hours to sunrise, we found the ride uneventful. Yet, we couldn't stop thinking about Leteau's servant, and the way he healed those vicious wounds, crippling his body and racking his frame with wet coughs. Probably none of our business, but we filed the information away nevertheless, for future use. Our arrival at the migrant camp was met with a brusque figure that we couldn't quite identify. The tall and gaunt Nele Gaunt and Allais demanded we hand over the USB before we even entered the camp. Of course, we had in mind our marching orders from Leteau. Give this to no one but Ellen Olivecrona. No one. Naturally, Allais had other plans. After a second, more threatening demand that we present the USB, we decided on one of the oldest tricks in the book. Unfortunately, Allais did not fall for the old switcheroo and promptly led us, information well in hand, to Ellen's tent. Even a favored lackey must wait for master, and Allais was quite perturbed when Ellen would not see them immediately, so we were provided quarters until Ellen could see us. In the meantime, we checked out the local haunts. This place was a shit show, to put it politely. Another way to express this would be to say that if Leteau had seen it, he'd have shit a brick. Probably literally. Camarija rubbed elbows with anarchs in the local shark joint. It doesn't take much among Cainites to spark a feeding frenzy, and this place couldn't have been more than a hop, skip, and a jump away. A group of Rusky Bruja lingered about the joint, and I'd swear we saw one of them siphoning blood from a blood doll for their own purposes. Greedy as well as nefarious. We spent a while looking around and may have done a bit of infiltration before the night was up, though before we could abscond with anything important, we must have tripped some kind of alarm despite our careful maneuvers. We escaped that close call undiscovered and eventually bedded down for the day. We awoke to an insistent Allais pushing us to our meeting with Ellen. It went about as well as you'd expect. The Ventru played her reaction to news of an impending Second Inquisition raid cool until Julian showed up. Again. He has a habit of showing up where he's not wanted. He told us in no uncertain terms what was about to happen, leaving Ellen to disappear with Allais in order to make preparations to move the migrant camp and its belongings. Of course, she said this all fit her plan. I knew better. So did Julian, who promptly tried to recruit us to flip on her and help him steal anything valuable we could. When we refused, Julian fucked off to do his own thing, and then we went to make assistance to Ellen, where we found Allais and a gang of assembled rogues and ghouls all packing heat. Uh-oh. Thinking on, or off, our feet, we leapt towards a nearby ladder on a tent and made good our escape. That's about when we started to hear the drone of helicopters and over the hustle and bustle of a camp being turned on its head. We still needed to be in Leteau's good graces, and Ellen had promised to teach us the secrets of her discipline if we did good work. So we gathered what computer equipment we could as Allais faced chastisement like a dog who'd been whipped. Jealous git. When all was said and done, we escaped with a train of others just as the camp was being raided by the Second Inquisition. The mortal migrants weren't so lucky. We hightailed it to Tucson after spending a night holed up in the desert, and Leteau paid us handsomely. So did Olivecrona. Sometimes it pays to be loyal, even if that means being a Camarija lapdog for the night. Fuck Julian, anyhow. We spent the remainder of our evening being ferried to various real estate locations by one of Leteau's lackeys, examining each and getting our eye on a few places that fit the bill. Which, normally, would bring us to tonight's adventures. Now, typically at this point, we would move into the next chapter of the Night Road. However, as I said at the beginning of the stream, today has been quite a day, quite an evening, filled with miasma and gore. filled with the perpetual care for our dear Keeper of Elysium, who's only just undergone an operation that will provide her with much more power than she has ever had previously. As a result of this fortunate string of circumstances, I find myself quite drained of blood, and don't think I'll be able to lead us through the night's adventure on the night road. However, I would be happy to sit and enjoy an enchanting cup of vitae with you all, if you'd care to oblige me. I hope each of you has something of your own to drink. It's important, you understand, for a kindred as old as I am, to stay hydrated. And I do love typo. Sometimes it's best to drink it from the glass. Although, in truth, nothing quite beats taking it from the font itself. Draining the veins, feeling that hot spatter of viscera course across your face. Delightful. I wonder then, as we partake of our own beverages, how have you all found your own days? Eventful? Productive? What mortal or immortal ventures have you found yourselves getting into? Please, if you would, share them, for at the end of this glass of certainly not blood, I'll likely be making my way for the evening so that I may join you all tomorrow night, refreshed and strong for our next series of adventures on the night road. To those of you just now joining us, welcome. It's nice to see so many names and faces, some of whom we've seen before, some perhaps we haven't. We're taking a bit of a break from the normal chain of events tonight, as I was just explaining. Though we've gone over an extensive recap of the previous 3 nights that we've spent on the night road, this evening we're feeling a mite peckish, hungry, tired, and ready for a cool glass of something red. Tell me, friends, what trials and tribulations have you undergone tonight? What things are you working on? Perhaps there's something we can do to assist in your endeavors. Perhaps just the act of talking about them will spark in you that chain of creation. Oh, that's lovely to hear. Dental work is one of the kindred's favorite things, as you might imagine. How have your interviews gone? I imagine if you are at the second of 3 that this means good things are likely in store. It's a pleasure to have you, John, as always. That sounds like a lovely way to perform an interview process. Several phases, a final assessment, an accurate and apt way to test the skills of such an elusively potentiated worker. I'm very excited to hear how the third phase goes, and I wish you well, my friend. I can't imagine you'll do anything but incredibly on it. I'm doing very well. A little tired today. Our Keeper of Elysium, Tia, has just undergone an operation to burn off several of the pieces of viscera upon her insides. She's recovering and resting as we speak. Things on that front went well, and I imagine that she'll rise with greater power than she's felt in any time within recent memory. However, the general mental play of things has left us quite drained. I imagine her recovery will go well. She's already been significantly more active than she has after previous similar operations. Now she's resting with our 2 hounds. She's eaten. She's drank. And now her head rests lovingly on a pillow of dreams. A cloud where she might find a slumber from which she can wake rested. I've switched some of my USB dependencies this evening, and I'm forced to use the mouse on my laptop. And I have to say, I do not enjoy this trackpad, even in the slightest. What sort of dental work did you get done today? Nothing too invasive, I imagine. I recently had one of our kindred doctors perform a similar set of expertise upon myself. I definitely understand how recovery from that might need a little bit of lurking. However, I imagine your recovery will be equally swift, and afterwards you'll likely feel just as lovingly as I did. I remember being able to feel like it was the first time I'd breathed in years, if not decades, after they'd finished. Strange thing we take for granted, the ability to have air course over our sinuses and into our lungs, filling them with that which gives so many of us life, until it doesn't. I hadn't planned for this evening to enter into the next chapter of the Night Road, to let us continue to shape the life, or unlife as it were, of the young gangrel neonate no one in the Arizona Southwest deserts. However, I am finding myself quite drained from the day's events, and think that that portion of our evening will have to be put off until the morrow, when, upon the moon's rise, I feel better rested and more powerful, with blood no longer sluggishly crawling through my veins. I feel I'll be able to better guide my fellow kindred in a series of choices that will forever shape the unlife of this poor gangrel neonate as they deliver upon Prince Leteau's courier jobs. Quite the cast of characters we've encountered thus far. Nosferatu, Malkavian, Bruja, the Second Inquisition, Banu Hakim. I imagine we're due for being set up, if I had to guess. I trust the sound levels this evening are all in good stead. I made a few changes to things before I went live tonight, and I hope the music isn't overriding my voice or vice versa to an extent that it's unpleasant. I'd like everyone to feel comfortable and relaxed as we speak and have our conversation. I'll certainly drink to that, my friend. That's good to know, and definitely something I can change. Hopefully now it's a little less over-exuberant. How has your stream been going? I think the last time I saw you, you were in the middle of an enrichment project, taking turns to increase your aptitudes in various vicissitudes of your life. Quite an intriguing concept, I think. One that you seem to be doing well at, last I saw. For those of you who do not already, there are two groups in here, I think, that are definitely worth checking out. Deus JZ is in the middle of a, I believe, 30-day enrichment project in which he practices steadily in a multitude of facets of his life so that he can better come to terms with the abilities inherently dormant within his frame. And the other, another long-time friend of mine from quite the same place as I met Deus JZ, actually. One of Valhalla's own warriors, Viking Blonde. Both a gentleman, a scholar, and sometimes a warrior. Our Keeper of Elysium chimes in to call him a troublemaker from the bed. He's also a man of many talents. One who I would highly recommend watching during the daytime hours when the yellow ball of hatred rises high in the sky and this one can't be on camera for fear of bursting into flames. If you want to be entertained and join a community of like-minded individuals who are more than loving enough to accept any into their fold, I highly recommend you give him a follow. Check out his stream and join his Discord while you're at it. It's a good place to be. Earlier this evening, while I was out and about running my own errands, I happened to leave him a small present before returning home. I'm eager to hear how he feels about that when he's able to break into it. I'm also eager for a time when I'm able to interact a little more with the public without this intimacy of technology between us. A day I imagine is coming quite sooner than we all expect. August would be a good estimate. Not too far away. I know for my particular industry, the loss of the cruise liners has led many in my field to fear an inadequacy of guests come the season of heat and lack of night. But August, come the end of that and the lengthening of the evening hours, I think would be quite a fitting return to, we can call it normalcy, I suppose, for now. You might see our lovely keeper exiting the room in the background. I'm sure she'll be back soon. Now, it is not unlikely, there is a non-zero chance that things will certainly progress beyond this summer, into the long dark of the winter, when the nights crawl longer than the days, a time in which you must imagine I thrive. If that is the case, let me assure you in no uncertain terms that this one will remain here to keep you entertained well into the evening. And we have many things planned, things in store for beyond the scope of the night road. I've just recently discovered that the group who writes The Night Road has announced 2 other books in the same genre, one about a detestable series of hunters eking out their existence, staking my kind left and right, and the other about a group of ancilla, elders of the kindred kind, and I'm quite eager to dig into those come this summer when they're available. And beyond that, I'm in the planning stages of a campaign through which to tell our story. I'll be bringing our keeper into the fold, allowing her the opportunity to showcase her lovely set of abilities as we weave together the magical tapestry, the life of a new neonate, embraced into the night skies with naught but hunger under her wings. Perhaps, if I am able to make the recruitment drive I'm desirous of, we'll be able to bring some more into that group and run a proper game rather than a game for one. for certainly it is a game. Who would ever imagine that it's blood filling my glass rather than wine? Except for those who wear the cross, that is. Overall, I'm excited to be here for you, my friends. I think this time slot is one that is often overlooked, one that doesn't have enough opportunity for advancing the schedules of the night owls. And where there is prey to predate, there will always be a kindred waiting in the wings, happy and secure in the knowledge that the heat flowing through the veins of those who watch will just as easily and quickly flow into the mouths of those who wait. All that said, we are trying to begin our own sort of Discord, an Elysium where any and all are welcome to join to help shape its path. Feel free to join. I believe there's an invite link in my about information, and we are quite eager for assistance in the technological endeavors of setting those things up, for as you might imagine from one who has lived as long as this one has, such things are quite elusive. Further, if you are interested in the idea of joining a storytelling exhibition of the kind introduced to you thus far in these streams, we welcome you to send us a message, reach out. Let us know what you're thinking and how you think we might better the entertainment exposition that comprises these conversations we're having about the history of my kind. I imagine there are many out there who would be quite angry at me for what I'm doing. I say to hell with them. You know as well as I do that monsters walk these lands, and we're far from a time where those monsters are anything but held at arm's length, watching and waiting for an opportunity in which to make themselves known, if only for a few brief moments. Perhaps we're the ones chatting you up at the taxi stand, or maybe we're the ones serving your food and drink. Maybe we're the life of the party, exhibiting our art in a gallery for you to gaze upon immensely until you've given us all your lifeblood in the way of patience and time. Whatever the case may be, we're happy to feed upon the emotions and prey upon the fears of things that we don't even know exist. The true monsters are the monsters who stand in the light of day and tell you the things they do are for your own good, after all. And we know all too many of those. Anonymity has certainly run its course. For some, it might be effective to linger in the shadows, an elusive shade of what might have been. I find myself drawn instead to the story of Lestat, a bard of vampiric renown, He who would have broke wide the stories of mortal and kindred alike, well before any other truly had. Granted, he more than paid for his sins against my kind. But we're in a new age, an age of cameras everywhere. Cameras and microphones, watching, waiting, listening, eager for a misstep of any sort, should such misstep bring ruination upon the being who expels it. And yet, so many make their fame and fortune riding upon the wave, surfing on that very sense of shame that should bring them down. I think there's something lovely in that. Something to be said for putting yourself forward in a time where so many are afraid to do so, fearing to tread where others dare not. So if the interest grips you who listen, reach out. Let's talk about a way to bring our story to the fore. If you're familiar with the Vampire the Masquerade framework and rule set of tabletop adventures, then you'll know a little of what I speak. And there exists much possibility of bringing such a story to the forefront of people's prefrontal lobes. All of that said, I think it is time for this one to step away for a bit, refill my glass, and I hope you'll do the same, and reach out. Send me a message, be it here, on Discord, or some other way you know how, and let's continue a conversation about what has been, what is, and what will be come the future. For without such communication and the power naturally existent within our words, what are we but rats scurrying upon the earth, rather than the gods of creation we were always intended to be? This is the Vampire Bart Neater, signing off for the evening, my friends. Join us tomorrow at 9 p.m. Pacific Time for the next chapter in Kyle Marquis and Choice of Games' The Night Road, and more of my, well, I guess you'll just have to join us to find out. Until then, close friends and friendly foes alike, I wish you good cheer, and I will speak beautiful things into the earth for each of you. It's been a pleasure being here this evening, and I'm certain we'll see one another again soon. Or at least, I'll see you. Good night and good bite.